Thank you. Good afternoon, Johar. I stand here thanking SEED and Just Transition Task Force of the state of Jharkhand. I'm very honored to be called into this city where I have grown up, I have been schooled, I have lived for 20 years in this city, and it's been an experience for me to come back and talk and look at the economy of Jharkhand, undergoing the quote-unquote the pioneer of the concept of just transition. Just to start the call or the session, I have a few slides, but I would not spend too much of time on the slides, and this is some sort of an approach that we take on just transition as to, and this session is on financing. So we look at vulnerability, annual economic implication, what's the cost of transition, what's the financing needs, and try and, it's a part of our work to try and look at how the costs and the social costs can be financed. This is a small piece which tells you that the number of states that are impacted, and you can see Jharkhand as to where it is impacted. This is about, not essentially talking about vulnerability in the sense it is a hypothetical situation if this transition were to happen away from coal power plants, and then what happens to the economy of the state. I'll just leave you with a few figures here. If you look at these broad numbers, you can clearly see the impact on two levels. One, on the GSDP of the state and how state budgets could get affected. And this does factor in workers, both direct, contractual, and all of induced employment which is there in the state of Jharkhand, that moving away into this transition has a cost, and this cost is significantly borne by the state exchequer, and therefore there is a need to kind of look at safety nets, rely on the state exchequer, but from where, I'll come to those points as soon as I finish this presentation. There's a need to look at skill development, there's a need to look at a fair bit of change in the economic drivers of the state, which was all getting discussed in the last session. Coming and finishing, trying to design a facility which then could possibly, people are talking of private investment, and could possibly pool in both public and private capital to enable finance all of the costs of transition. Now, coming back, so this is just a small snapshot, but I'll use the valuable time Ashish, moderator, has given me to make just a few points. And they are as follows. See, this is a session on finance, and we work in the space of finance. But let me start by saying that we're talking of climate finance, we're talking of green finance. See, ultimately at the end of the day, पैसा को कोई रंग नहीं होता है. पैसा वहीं जाता है जहाँ पैसा बनता है या पैसा वापस आएगा सूद लेके. तो पैसा का कोई रंग नहीं होता है. जब हम कॉमर्स पे बात कर रहे हैं ना, तब पैसा वहीं जाएगा. सो पैसा तब मूव करता है जब पैसा मूव करने के लिए जगह हो. सो पैसा रियल सेक्टर से मूव करता है. डिमांड ऑन मनी नीड्स टू बी क्रिएटेड. अगर मैं सप्लाई बढ़ा दूँ पैसा का, तो ये नहीं कि कोई डिमांड बन जाएगा. So creating a supply of climate finance, to articulate that, finance does not create its own solutions. Finance flows, and therefore finance has to be demanded. So इसका मतलब ये है कि हमें पैसे के लिए डिमांड क्रिएट करना पड़ेगा इस स्टेट पे. एंड ये डिमांड हम कैसे क्रिएट करें? अगर सर बोलते हैं कि हम कोल से निकल जा रहे हैं, कोयले से निकल जा रहे हैं, तो हमारी जो झारखंड की strengths है, there is a lot of districts which are in coal, and all of Coal India Limited central coal fields significantly, and you're sitting here, is significantly dependent on coal, and there is a lot of employment out of coal, so that there's a need to think on what. We assume that the world is going through transition, probably कोई merit नहीं है इसमें कि हम coal लेके बैठे रहे. So therefore coal is important for sure, but let's start thinking. एंड यहाँ पर मैं एक पॉइंट बोलना चाहता हूँ बिफोर getting into it, that I have been looking into lot of prescriptions on Jharkhand, and I'll tell you here that personally I find all those prescriptions, and it's a personal opinion, and I've been seeing moving out to services economy, get to ready-made manufacturing garments, get to textiles, and the tags is a sector which is a well-endorsed report by most UN institutions, and a variety of things, except for one World Bank project called Johar, which drives agricultural livelihoods and its significant value addition in agriculture. And I want to keep out Tasar over here, because Tasar and sericulture is key to Jharkhand for sure, and there is needs to be demand for money needs to get created out of that. But let me step back and say 42-43% which goes to the India is a reverse fiscal situation, fiscal federal situation, and that वो पैसा वापस आता है. वो पैसा की जो allocation है, वो पैसा की formula जो allocate करती है, वो formula में गलती है. So उसको ठीक करना पड़ेगा on the public finance side. Now let me come to the sectors. See, Jharkhand's basic competitive advantage is what? See, every country tries, or every state for that matter, it is an issue of comparative advantage. Comparative advantage कहाँ पे है? Natural resources पे है. ये सिर्फ कोल नहीं है, कॉपर है, बॉक्साइट है, लाइमस्टोन है, आप गिनते जाओ, यूरेनियम तक है. So the issue is, जब लोग बोलते हैं कि माइनिंग से निकल जाओ, कोल से निकल जाओ, कोल की दूसरी यूजेज सोचो, ताकि हम कोल को प्रोडक्टिवली यूटिलाइज. एंड गिव यू one simple example. The world talks about gas. बट अगर आप कोल गैसिफिकेशन देखोगे तो कॉम्पोजिशन ऑफ नेचुरल गैस एंड कोल गैसिफिकेशन इज ऑलमोस्ट द सेम. तो वो गैस कैसे ग्रीन फ्यूल हो गया और हमारे यहाँ कोल कैसे काला हो गया? सो दैट्स अ क्वेश्चन दैट नीड्स टू बी आंसर्ड. दैट कोल की यूसेज प्रॉब्लम इंटरनेशनल फ्रेटर्निटी में ये है कि वो कोल पे फोकस करते हैं, आउटपुट पे नहीं. प्रॉब्लम क्रिएटर इज कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड एंड नॉट एवरीथिंग दैट यू नीड टू बर्न. सो अगर हम कोयला जलाते हैं और उसको कोल गैस बना के जलाते हैं, यूज़ करते हैं, दैट शुड बी इक्वल टू, एंड कार्बन कैप्चर एंड स्टोरेज इज एन ओल्ड टेक्नोलॉजी, इट इज़ पॉसिबल. कोल इंडिया लिमिटेड कैन डाइवर्सिफाई फॉर कार्बन सिक्वेस्ट्रेशन इन द सीम्स. So it is possible. You need power for the economic engine to grow. Access to electricity. Jharkhand में कितना? Let's count. बोकारो, पतरातू, एक नया पावर प्लांट गोड्डा में आया है. आप ऐड कर लो मैथन का पावर प्लांट, ऐड कर लो पतरातू, बोकारो. You can add a few other power plants. It will be about 2.7 gigawatt. And that's what can be done. To think of power sector as the growth engine is here. Renewable होगा कैसे? Renewable तब possible है अगर storage है. Now look at the topography of Jharkhand and look at sitting at this Chotanagpur plateau, it is at a rise. तो वो renewable अगर grid में जाएगा, that is infirm without storage, उसकी कोई use नहीं है, वो curtailment हो जाएगी. अगर curtailment हो जाती है, अगर आप pump storage लगाते हो, that becomes an economic engine. So pump storage. Look at mining as a resources. So there is a lot of people will come and tell you that diversify karo, sector diversify karo, is pe jao, services, etc. All that is easier said than done. Natural resources jahan hai, basic principles, comparative advantage of nations. Michael Porter, chapter 1 talks about that first look at factor endowments. So please look at factor endowments, and these factor endowments for this state are huge and massive. It's a question of how we mobilize the value addition of that sector and not transfer the value to outside the state. We are an economy in Jharkhand and therefore have to capture the value for people here and the local and indigenous people here. That is, go to forest produce, go to services, it's not that easy to change. It remains on paper in the report, so it's imperative to understand that money will flow, but the demand for money has to be created by state action and state initiatives on changing the direction of economic drivers, and they have to be aligned. It still can be power, it still can be mining, and it still can be coal. I'll pause here and thank you.
Thanks.